As many of you know, I went to Paris alone in the last 9 days of June. And as I was there, many things have been playing out with both my mom and my biological father. I'm not quite ready to talk about it yet, but I will get there. But it played out to the point where it was an incredible trip. It was absolutely incredible. I did so much, there was so much work that happened, even though I spent many of the days, walking along the Seine crying, and some days at night. I spent the days just visiting things I love there and eating food. And every night, honestly, reading my book, Neurotribes, on the history of autism. It was incredible. And like I said in my last video, if you've never been able to travel alone, even if it's to a hotel in town or a tent somewhere, in a camping ground alone, if you're able to do that or safe or whatever it is, or renting a friend's house, that being alone is just, it's such a profound experience. And I've always loved being alone. And that's a different story, as I've been talking a lot about high masking autism and trying to uncover that aloneness and hypervigilance in our bodies and how all that plays out with complex PTSD. But two things I really came back with specifically around my life, and actually there were many things, but two things I want to make videos about specifically, was the concept, number one, of deprivation, of depriving myself. And the second one relates to my home, and I'm going to talk about that in a separate video. But this idea that as I was sitting on the plane, just on the way out, I was thinking about how much I deprived myself of. I hadn't had a vacation in 2 years. I work all of the time, whether it's making videos, TikToks, but my priority is my family and my patients, of course. But my other really high priority is showing up here. And it can feel really draining at times because it's like, how do I make content people want to see? And I can just get in my head about it. And do I make videos that I just wish I knew? Do I follow the script on how to get videos to do well? And I've really not done that mostly. But I realize that how much I just don't do things for myself. And it has really played out in my physical health, my chronic illness, my autoimmune disease. And so I wanted to share with you some signs about how you might be depriving yourself and sort of abandoning yourself. And then we're going to talk about some things that kind of will hopefully help that. So the first thing is that when we have had childhood trauma, what makes us deprive ourselves is often this idea that Carl Rogers, who was a humanist psychologist, I believe a psychologist, therapist, talks about this concept called unconditional positive regard. And the idea was that in therapy, that our clients should feel a sense of unconditional positive regard, that we hold them in this space of wherever you are, it's okay. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to walk alongside you and to regard you with this general sense of, I believe it's love. I really do in therapy. It's a different kind of love. It's a boundaried love. But it's this very unique situation that only if you've had a really good therapist connection, I think, will you really understand. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen all the time. But if we weren't regarded in unconditional positive regard type of ways in childhood, if it was conditional positive regard, if it was conditional and we weren't regarded at all, right? Whatever it is that we don't really grow up expecting to receive unconditional positive regard from anyone. I think our kids can be the safest place, but kids can also be a big trigger for our own trauma and our own well-being, as they are supposed to be as they're growing up and needing things from us. But what happens is we've never really had, and I don't know that anyone can give you full unconditional, even your own children, right? I mean, your kids can hurt you, you can hurt them, but ideally, I want my kids to feel loved no matter what, but I'm a human being, for example. So of course, if they're doing things that are really damaging and bad for them and hurtful, I'm going to be upset about that at some point. I'm going to want more for them. But I'm more talking about how we can have parents who were safe and not safe, or just not safe. And as I've said, if you're safe and not safe, you're just not safe, right? I don't care how great you are on Wednesday. If on Friday you're calling me bad names and screaming at me and raging at me, or my siblings or my other parent, you're not, from a neurological nervous system level, safe. You're just not, because I can't count on that. Not that if you ever yell, you're unsafe, but I'm talking about chronic engagement that way. A lot of chronic yelling and screaming, I really do believe, does a lot of damage to our nervous system and to our relationships. Not to say I've never yelled and screamed, because if you've been parenting, you've probably done it. But there are some parents who that's just their go-to. And for many of us, like me, both my parents had significant rage issues. And that was not always directed at me, but being in the house and hearing it was also incredibly unsafe. So we've never had this regard. We've learned to sort of live with this incongruence between a parent, providing for us and or saying they care for us, or sometimes being there or not, and then not regarding us really at all. What did it feel like to be, witnessing parents yelling or being screamed at and yelled at, or being criticized, controlled, whatever it is? And so we basically, I think, have learned we have to deprive our own selves of the longing for safety and connection. And so the act of deprivation feels very normal. Like I don't get to have what I want in this world, when it comes to security and safety and stability, because I never had it. And so we turn that into ourselves. We start to deprive ourselves, and I don't think we necessarily do it intentionally. It's just that's how we've grown up, that we don't get to have positive regard for ourselves, let alone expect someone else to do it. So what are the signs? The first thing is that you often have chronic mental or physical health issues. And it plays out because you deprive yourself of doctor's appointments, dentist appointments. You have that tooth that bothers you, or you have an undiagnosed illness that you just kind of like IBS, or fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, whatever it is, and it's been there for so long that you just sort of get stuck. And also those things like that can be very hard to identify and treat. But the point is, or you have chronic anxiety and depression, but whatever it is, it's like you just learn to live with it. You don't really expect it to get better. And you deprive yourself of even thinking about what life might look like without those things, or with support. Number 2, you don't express your needs, you don't set boundaries, you don't hold boundaries. It's natural for you to deprive yourself of the bare minimum when it comes to that. You hold yourself back, you don't engage in true vulnerability, and you might isolate to deal with things, right? And if you're being alone, that's not the same thing as isolating. There's a point where people will say, I just cannot, it's too painful to be with others. And that is, I think, different from I really enjoy my own mind, my own company. And yes, there's a piece there for wherever you are, whether it's on the spectrum, whether you are, living with chronic trauma, or your nervous system does feel safest alone. And so that can become the guiding principle. It's just I'm only good when I'm alone. And yet maybe you long for more connection, more friendships, but you just feel like it's overwhelming, or it's too much, or you don't deserve that. And so for whatever reason, you stay stuck in a cycle of depriving that from yourself. You believe that you're different, and so you don't engage, right? So this part of who you are, of this deprivation, has become a character trait, and that kind of manifests in, well, I don't really deserve it anyway. So like I was just saying, it all kind of flows together. You don't trust others, so you push people away. Part of never receiving positive regard is that people aren't safe. People hurt me. My own parents, for example, hurt me. And so you don't really let people in. Or maybe you actively sabotage good relationships because you don't believe it's possible. It feels too scary when they get close. You don't take risks for your dreams, your longings, your hopes. And that might look like you don't take the steps to follow through with that, that program you wanted to go to, or that hobby you wanted to learn, or that skill. But you just deprive yourself. These longings exist inside of you, but you're just so used to it that you don't even see it. You might place fear and fear of failure, and so you place all of that ahead of what it really feels like to long for something inside. And so you play small. You don't take, like I said, risks, or you don't want to risk upsetting others. If I go back to school, my partner won't like the schedule change with the kids. even though you long for it deep inside, for example. You have chronic hopelessness. You kind of surrender to this idea that good enough is enough, or the bare minimum is enough, or, you know, like a life without hope is just how it's supposed to be. So you just live in this kind of hopeless state, but you don't really like even see that because it's just how you've always been. You identify in being a pleaser, in fawning behaviors, never putting yourself first. It feels wrong to do that. And what you've learned is that when I deprive myself, I make others happy. And when I deny what I need, I give others what they want. And in turn, like if that was in childhood, that served me because the threatening parent was less of a threat when I rotated around them. And so that's your whole model for deprivation, means other people are happier, and that may have been the way it needed to be in childhood, but now you're stuck in that. You often feel resentful, feel angry, you blame others. Your inner and outer critic keeps you stuck in all of that. And so it's like this push-pull inside, this deprivation of like, you don't deserve that, and you're not good enough for that, and you can't handle that. And yet this longing, like I'm saying, for that deep inside. So I think you have to look around your life and say, do I deprive myself of friendships, of the job I want, of the love I want, of the skills, the dreams, the passions, the travel, whatever it is, because I just don't ever think about the fact that I get to do things for myself, right? Even me going on a trip like that, it's not like it was the greatest financial decision, but I decide that, okay, I'm going to make sacrifices over here. I don't buy myself gifts. I don't, do things because it's okay. Like, it's fine. I'm fine. And then I have this push-pull of like, no, like I need to feel alive and living and good about myself, especially to be the parent I want to be, the person I want to be, and especially to be here, to be the therapist I want to be. And so the minute I got on the plane, I felt that like, oh my God, I can't believe you do this every time. You wait to the last minute, then you book things when you finally realize how bad it is, but you should be booking vacations 6 months to a year out alone, or whatever you're doing. You need to be thinking about what is good for you ahead of time, not doing it when you're like, oh, the water is like coming over my head and I'm going to drown. Oh, I need to do this now. It shouldn't have to be like I'm swimming as fast as I can. It should be like, this is a goal. And so that I'm not living, and hopefully you're not living out of a sense of deprivation. And let me say, like, in all things considered, I have a very lovely life, but it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to be human. And I am by myself for the most part. I support myself. I take care of my family and my kids. And just like all of you, we're walking this path alone. And we're all on different levels of our education, our status economically, what we can afford or not. And I understand that even being able to make videos and be here is a privilege. Having a home to live in is a privilege. So I don't want it to come across as like, oh, like poor me. I also don't want to minimize the fact that we all have deep, deep suffering inside and deep pain, no matter where you are. Except I think when you have money, as you get more, money, you get more resources to help with that pain. And at the same time, I have met some of the most unhappy humans ever who have the most, who have access to all the resources in the world. So the point is, like, only you can know on your own life and scale where you are depriving yourself and where you deserve less deprivation, more prioritizing of yourself. And if you're a depriver, you're never going to be walking around the world like arrogant, putting yourself first. It's probably always going to be a battle of saying, wait a minute, I matter too. So what you can do if you want to work on that, obviously, is here's what I would do. I would go back through this video, and for everything that I stated that you relate to, I would write down a goal and an opposite action for what it would mean for you not to relate to that thing, if that makes sense. So if I place, for example, fear ahead and failure, and I play small, I would say, yeah, if I were you and I was watching this and I was like, yeah, I do that too, I would say, okay, what is one thing I could do to challenge myself as a goal that would be not playing small, that would me putting fear on the back burner and taking a risk, like just going through each thing. If I identify with fawning and people pleasing, where I always put everyone first, what is one opposite action? What is one thing I could do where I said, you know what? I'm going to do what feels good for me here. I would love to do whatever this is. That's going to be a goal. I would really work on that. I would identify those things. Obviously, the classic reparenting and trauma therapies and support and books and podcasts on healing that inner self. That the earliest part of yourself, often that very core child self, was shaped and developed to believe that only in deprivation can you live a life and can you matter. And that is just not true. It's not. But it takes real, here I am at 55 going, oh my God, I'm still doing this. It takes real effort, and it has to be a continual goal. If you grew up with a life and a childhood that said, my needs almost always must come last. So that's it. I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for being here. Please stay safe and well, and I'll see you soon. Bye.